Hey everyone, Cleo here and welcome to my channel, and I look like I'm a pale ghost, but okay. During the winter months I'm not getting any light in here, so I might have to switch to professional light at some point, but for the moment this will have to do. So today I'm presenting you with my November wrap-up. My November wrap-up is a complete letdown. I mean, it's not a complete letdown, but in total of in the volume of books that I read, it is a complete letdown, because on my TBR I had put a possible of 6 and in the end I have to say that it is a disappointing 2. Yeah, but I also got 2/3 of the way in a third one, and this third one was the longest book on the list, so it's not a complete letdown. I still got in more than 1,000 pages this month, which is super. However, my super ambitious TBR had 2,000 books in it, and I will blame myself for it in part because I rediscovered The Sims, and you should never rediscover The Sims because it takes up so much of your time, and I should have actually listened to an audiobook at the same time while playing The Sims, and then maybe I could have also gotten in an extra book, but so I didn't do that, so we're stuck with 2 for this month. Now the 2 books that I read this month is, first of all, I read The Uncommon Type by Tom Hanks. Now this is a collection of short stories written by Tom Hanks, the actor. I read this book on the commute, and it is really ideal for that. So if you have a short commute or a longer one, you can buy multiple short stories if you like. I have a commute of about half an hour top and like half an hour maximum, and I could usually almost finish a certain story or or be able to finish one. But so it's a collection of short stories, and they're all linked through a common element, and this is something that you don't necessarily discover at the very get-go, and it is like the beginning of each chapter. I'm hoping you will be able to see this, but I'm just going with it. You have a picture of a typewriter. These pictures are, by the way, super gorgeous, because Tom Hanks is a collector of typewriters, and the uncommon type at the front also refers, of course, to the typewriter. And so at the beginning of each chapter you have a picture of the typewriter, but while the stories don't always revolve around typewriters, there will always be a typewriter present in each story. So I figured this out, I don't know, after the 4th one or so, let's say, and then it becomes quite fun to look out for them every single short story. Certain short stories are really also, the typewriter plays a central part in it. So Tom Hanks is a collector of typewriters. He knows a lot about them, and he collects very rare pieces and things like that. So you can also really feel this, especially in the short story in which the typewriter is central. You really feel like the love for typewriting, for the medium. Yeah, so I really liked them. I mean, they were super engrossing. On my bus ride I would always be totally sucked into them. Maybe not in every single one of the stories, but in the majority of the stories I really got sucked into them. Some of the stories also interrelate because they contain the same characters. And so the characters you follow in the first short story, for example, they come back a couple of times. The only criticism I will have for this is that they are very, all the stories are very warm and loving, and they have happy endings, and at times I would find myself wishing for a bad ending, just because I personally am a bit of a sucker for main characters dying and stuff like that. So in that sense, for me, it wasn't a letdown or something. That was just something that at times I wished for, and that never happened. But that's not necessarily saying that it's bad or anything like that. I'm sure most people would actually really like the fact that they all have happy endings and things like that. In that sense, it is also perfect for the holidays. I feel like they do really have this sense of wonder, enchantment that is crucial to the holiday season. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. I'm not saying it's the best book in the world, but it was a very nice read, and I finished it super fast, and I also finished it rather fast. You know, I read it on the commute, so taking into account that on a day I had at max an hour to read it, and so I finished it in under 2 weeks, and it is 400 pages. So in my opinion, that was quite fast for me. But so yeah, recommend it. definitely. The second book that I read, I'm not necessarily going to recommend, and that's a shame, because it is the Man Booker Prize winner of the year, and that is Milkman by Anna Burns. Now, I had already heard that a lot of people don't feel like it is the best book that was nominated, that a lot of the books that were nominated were more suitable or were more widely liked. So oftentimes this book is also described as a difficult book, and it is a difficult book, which is not necessarily saying that is my criticism of it. I like difficult books a lot of the time. The reason why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it is because I ended up feeling like, okay, I didn't dislike it, but also didn't necessarily like it, you know. I did mark quite a couple of pages in the beginning, not so much towards the end, and that's mostly because I didn't have my my little post-its with me at the time, because after I finished Uncommon Type, this became my commute book. And so, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So what it is about, maybe I should say that as well. So Milkman takes place in Northern Ireland, and it is about a conflict between the UK and Northern Ireland, but it's not necessarily at the foreground. You also don't realize this until a bit later on. It is very much about, it's very much central to the story, but it's not really necessarily referred to. It's never explicitly referred to, so it can also be totally wrong. It might be about tension between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I'm not entirely sure about these two things, but it is about the tension in a community, the tension between them and the other, them and the oppressor, and then it's very much delves into a sort of the consequences that this has for the community, in a community in which you're not allowed to stand out, because if you stand out, then you will become like, there will be some negative connotation from either one party or the other party, you know. You cannot do well for both unless you just stay, unless you keep yourself bland, unless you make sure that you don't stand out, that you don't get the attention of either party. And so it is very much about navigating a society like that, navigating a society in which you constantly like diminish your personality, in which the main character, for example, she's constantly going outside and reading while walking, and this is seen as like a sort of subterfuge, as if she's trying to be rebellious, as if she's being arrogant or something by doing so. So she really gets some attention from a simple act just as that, for example. And then, now there are some very nice things in it, but passages in it, so I definitely feel like it is worth it for certain passages. However, on the whole, I feel like it was quite difficult to get through at some points, and so my pace for this one was quite low, because so it is 348 pages, and it really took me the entire month. So in the beginning, when Uncommon Type was my commute book, I was reading this in the evenings, and then when Tome Topple started, I put this one aside for my commute, and then I read another book in the evenings, and I almost feel like I had the same pace when this was my commute book as I had when it was when I was reading it in the evening, because I could just not continue on for longer than like 10 pages or something in one go, because yeah, it's really not, like, the pace is not there, and the story is also told in a bit of a weird way sometimes, because there are these time jumps. So something will happen and then you get to a next scene, and then somewhere in the scene is mentioned that you're actually, that for example, if a person were to die, that person hasn't died yet, so you're constantly having to kind of reset your clock to see where does this scene fit in, which is, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, it can be done brilliantly, but it was confusing in any case for me in this book. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, because I don't think that the payoff is worth the difficulty of getting through it. But if you like challenging books, if you like difficult books, definitely give it a go. There are some very nice passages in there, some very beautiful texts that I have marked. Maybe I'll put some in the comments later if they aren't too like spoilery, but I mean they're not that much spoilers to the book neither. I'm still happy that I read it. My plan is to also finish the other Man Booker Prize nominees since they're all on my shelf, but that'll be for 2019. So already New Year's resolution to get to. And then I'll have to mention the total failure that was Tome Topple for me this year. So I didn't know about Tome Topple in advance, so I also didn't mention it in my TBR for November because I didn't know about it. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, perfect, because I am reading a book that is over 700 pages, and maybe this can push me to make it happen, to be able to finish them in this month. And that might have actually happened if it weren't for the fact that the first week of Tome Topple, first of all I started a day late because I was confused by the concept of 12, what is it, AM, PM? See, I'm still confused about it. I was confused about the starting time, so I thought like it's at 29th at midnight, I guess, and so I thought that meant at the end of the 29th, well, versus I think it was actually starting at the beginning of the 29th, of the 16th. See, major confusion happening with Tome Topple for me. But so in any case, I think I started a day late, but even if I ended it a day late, then I still didn't make it. But yeah, okay, secondly, I rediscovered The Sims and I downloaded an extra expansion pack, so I spent a lot of my time in the third week of November playing The Sims instead of reading. And then in the fourth week I did manage to catch up quite a bit for Tome Topple. However, I also am currently sheltering 3 cats, and while they don't take up all of my time, they do take up a little bit more of my time than if I didn't have them at the moment. So yeah, so if you hear in the background noise, by the way, this is them. They are currently quite calm. Like, I had to wait until they settled down a bit because they were getting like a bit hyper. But in any case, so the book that I was gonna read for Tome Topple, I actually even mentioned 2 books that I might get to for Tome Topple, but yeah, sure, that definitely didn't happen. I also already knew in advance that it was probably not going to happen. I mean, the first book was over 700 pages. If I wanted to get to 2 books, that meant I had to read like 100 pages a day, which is definitely not my page count. But so the book that I ended up going with was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Now, I had already, as I mentioned in my November TBR, I've already read a book by Hanya Yanagihara. I wasn't entirely, I mean, I liked the writing style, but it was a bit like, it was about a tribe somewhere in the Amazon. It was all very weird and things like that, so I wasn't really sure what I felt about the book. For this one, I have to say, so I'm 2/3 of the way in, so it means I'm almost at page 500 or something like that. I'm really loving it so far, so I can say that after this one I'll definitely continue reading the next books that Hanya Yanagihara brings out. So the book is about 4 boys who go to school together, university together, and their lives after university. But mainly it is about one of the characters, Jude Sinclair, who has had a traumatic childhood, and we see him developing throughout the story. Now, major trigger warning for this book. It is basically any trigger you can think of: rape, child abuse, sexual violence, like self-damaging actions. All of these things, they're all in there. So suicide. Yeah, suicide is in there. So yeah, beware when you go into this. This is a dark book. Do not read this when you're in a bad mood or when you are feeling down, depressed, tired, anything like that, because it will augment your mood. I mean, it is described as a book, as a cry book, and I was not sure in advance whether I would actually cry in it, because I usually don't cry with books. It happens very rarely, but I can already tell you that I have indeed already shed some tears over this. that being said, it's not like you cry all the way through or something. There are certain passages, and it will be dependent upon each person who reads this, I guess, but there are certain passages that... Alright, I had to take a sneeze break in there. I think I'm getting allergic to these cats, so I'll have to get some medication soon. But so there are certain passages in this book that do at least make me want to cry, and or did really make me cry. So be aware of this in advance. There is really, I mean, a lot of the violence and abuse and things like that happens in the past, but it is also happening in the present. And the perspective of this boy Jude, when you're reading in his perspective, is very depressing, because he has a very, very low image of himself, and he really feels like he doesn't deserve any love or anything like that. So it is not always the easiest perspective to read from. And certainly at the beginning, this is what held me back at some point, because like I guess like somewhere in the first 100 pages or something like that. I mean, the first part reads super fascinating. The second part for me was a bit of a slump. And I feel like that was because it was like the first time you read from Jude's perspective, and it was just hard to keep going in that perspective for a quite long period of the book. Later on you get more of a diversity of perspectives for a couple of times, but you're mostly following 2 out of the 4 characters. I in advance thought you were following all 4 of them, but at the moment I'm definitely feeling like 2 of the characters are mainly the main characters. So I didn't get around to reading it. And I also didn't go around to reading 500 pages, because I really was hoping yesterday to get to the 500 page marks, because like the minimum length of a Tome Topple book, it needs to be 500, so I could have at least said, well, I did read 500 pages, which I actually did, because I did finish Milkman at the same time. But yeah, in this single tome I did not get to the 500 page mark, so Tome Topple was a failure for me this year. I'm definitely hoping, I will definitely participate again next year, and I will make myself stop playing The Sims at the same time. But so yeah, that's it for me for the month of November. I'll definitely be finishing this one in the month of December, even though I was originally going to make it a classics only month. But yeah, there's no way I'm putting this down at this point, because now I really need to know what happens. So yeah, see you on my next video, which will probably be... Oh no, it will not be my December TBR, because I will try to do Hailey's Bookmas video series. So if you don't know, go and check it out. It's the channel Hailey in Wonderland, and so she does a video every day of the month of December. And so the first video is showing off your bookmas tree. Now my bookmas tree is semi-finished, but like I still need to put in some of the Christmas balls. So I have all of the ornaments in there, but not like the balls. So I will still finish that and hopefully not get distracted by the cats too much.